משנכנס Adar מרבים בשמחה. I have this custom to wear this funny clown hat every year at the beginning of Adar because I feel like, if there are customs that when the month of Av starts that we're supposed to reduce happiness, so in the month of Adar we're supposed to increase happiness. And so I try to add to that by having this custom of wearing this funny hat. But then, people, they come up to me and they say, yeah, but this year there's an extra Adar. It's Adar Aleph. It's not really an Adar. Why are you wearing that hat? And then there's people who will come up to me and say, listen, this year, it's not such a happy year. We have a very difficult situation in Israel. We're at war around the world. There's massive anti-Semitism. We really can't have this joy now. So what I'd like to share with you in the next few minutes is my approach to this whole season. And I'd like to explain, first of all, about Adar Rishon, this first extra Adar. And then we'll talk about the difficult situation of Israel and the Jews. So first of all, to begin about Adar Rishon. So the Gemara in Megillah, Daf Vav, already says, Ein ben Adar HaRishon le'Adar HaSheni, ela kriyat HaMegillah u'matanot le'avyonim. And the Tosfot add mishloach manot. So the Gemara says there's really no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar, except for those 3 mitzvot that we do specifically on the holiday of Purim, which are reserved for the second Adar. But the Gemara fails to discuss the whole big party that we have, the Su'udat Mitzvah, what's known as the Mishteh. And this leads to a big discussion among the poskim. Should we have the mishteh or should we not have the mishteh in the first Adar? The Beit Yosef summarizes the opinions, and in the end he said, it's not the custom to have this mishteh in the first Adar. Nevertheless, at the end of the Shulchan Aruch, so the Rama adds, he says, Mikol makom yarbek etzat besuda, kedei letzet yedei hamachmirim. He says, nevertheless, even though it's true the custom isn't a habit, you should really add a bit to your meal on the what's known as Purim Katan, on the Purim day during the first Adar, because there are people who are strict and actually have this, and believe we should have this full mishteh. And then the Rama, in order to sort of bring like a proof text, he brings the book of Mishlei that says, V'tov lev mishteh tamid. And somebody who has a good heart is always having a festive meal. What's interesting here is that the Sharei Tshuva notes something, that there's the gematria of mishteh tov, of a good meal, is equal to Adar Rishon. And so here you already have a kind of a proof text that really we should be celebrating an Adar Rishon. Many of you will say, are you kidding? You're giving me a gematria to prove your point? So, okay, you're right. Let me give you a more significant text. The Sfat Emet on the Gemara itself says, De'ikar hanes v'hasimcha haya shayach b'shnehem ele deratzu chazal lahashvot hayom tov b'chol hashanim. He says that the fact is that the joy and this whole miraculous thing that we're celebrating on Purim are equal. Adar Aleph and Adar Bet, these 2 months of Adar, they're completely equal, to the point that we should really be having 2 Purims. Every year we should have a Purim in Adar, or every year that there's an extra month, we should have Purim in Adar Aleph and Purim in Adar Bet. And the only reason that we don't is because the sages wanted to have all of our calendar years look the same. You have one Pesach every year, you have one Purim every year. It would be funny that every so often we would have 2 Purims in 1 year. So for that reason, they said, we're going to have 1 Purim and it's going to be on the second Adar. And then the question becomes, well, if both of these Adars are really equal in their joy and in their character, so then why are we having it in Adar Bet, in the second Adar? So Rav Yaakov Emden, in his Sheilat Yavitz, so he says, we want to lahatzmid, we want to put together Geula and Geula, redemption and redemption. There's a value in celebrating the redemption of Pesach, right after we celebrate the redemption of Purim. And so we put them together and we celebrate Purim in the second month. But the fact of the matter is, this is very interesting because really it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, we're celebrating these two miraculous events, and they are both miraculous events that were carried through by all kinds of miracles. But on the other hand, there's a reason to celebrate them separately, because the miracles that happened in Pesach are very different from the miracles that happened in Purim. In Pesach, we celebrate God's open hand. We celebrate revealed miracles, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea. These are events that you can't deny the hand of God. They go against everything we know about nature. And so when we celebrate Pesach, we celebrate the open hand of God. On the other hand, when we celebrate Purim, these are what are known as nisim nistarim. These are hidden miracles. We need to look for God behind the scenes when we read the story of Megillat Esther. So we need to see the hand of God as he arranges the political constellation to allow us to attack our enemies. And we get the permit from the leader of the free world, Joe Biden. I'm sorry, I meant Achashverosh. And we need to look behind the scenes when we are completely victorious. And it's really God who has granted us this amazing miracle over the Amalekites in in Shushan Habirah. And so the celebration of Purim is really a celebration and a joy in faith that we can see that it's really God's hidden hand that is helping us through history. It's seeing God's hidden hand in the darkest times. It's seeing God and rejoicing in the fog of war. And that's really not something that's so simple. And everybody today is really asking themselves, certainly in Israel, how can we rejoice? Times are very difficult. Our hearts are heavy. How can we rejoice at a time like this? And I think the question stems from a misunderstanding about rejoicing, really a misunderstanding about emotion itself. Rav Soloveitchik writes that there are two types of emotion. There's emotion in a vacuum, pure emotion. And then there's emotional experience. That's part of what he calls the table of emotions, that it's in a part of a continuum, and that life is complicated and we don't experience emotions in a vacuum. He says, simcha, joy in a vacuum, deteriorates to what is called holilut, debauchery. And that is nothing that Judaism wants to have anything to do with. Joy, simcha, in Judaism is something, again, that's part of this continuum. We're very aware of all the sides of what's going on in the world. We are very understanding that there are difficult times and there are sad things that are going on. But nevertheless, at this time, we choose to focus on the joy. And it's not that we are unaware of all the other emotions in the table of emotions, but we are now focusing on being joyous, on seeing God's hand helping us through history. And so that is what we're rejoicing about. And that's really what the month of Adar is all about. Because if we read in the Megillat Esther, so toward the end, it says, V'hachodesh asher ne'epach lahem miyagon l'simcha mi'ever liyom tov. It says that month, the month of Adar, which was turned from agony to joy, from mourning to festivity. That's what this month is about. It's a month that we fast on the fast of Esther and then immediately go into the rejoicing and feasting of Purim. It's a month where the emotions are constantly topsy-turvy in conflict, and we focus on what needs to be focused at that time. And so that's really what our joy is about. Our joy that begins in the month of Adar comes from an understanding that despite the Amalekites in the world, there is a God who works behind the scenes to bring our redemption and to bring the world to its perfection. Our joy that begins in the month of Adar comes from a knowledge that despite the Amalekites in the world, we are the chosen people to bring the world to its perfection. This holiday of ours, this simcha of ours, comes from that knowledge that despite the Amalekites in the world, we will not be vanquished. And it is for this reason that even in a year like this, in a year of war and anti-Semitism, even in a year like this where we are celebrating an initial Adar, a first Adar, we sing already from that first Adar, משנכנס Adar, מרבים בשמחה. Chag Sameach.